Venezuela is at a crossroads. The country's economy has been ravaged by chronic inflation. But it's much worse than that. Venezuela is politically divided. The opposition insists that the ruling socialists have destroyed not just the economy, but also democratic institutions. Chavists of President Nicolas Maduro in turn accuse the opposition of being elitist and exploiting Venezuela's poor. They allege opposition leaders are in the pay of the United States. But what about the people? For ordinary Venezuelans, there seems to be little trust in politicians. Despite months of violent unrest and 120 deaths on the streets, Chavists again swept the board in recent elections, taking 17 out of 23 governorships. Once more, the opposition cried foul. It's in this context that the EU awarded Venezuela's opposition and political prisoners its prestigious Sakharov Prize for human rights. Ramon Guillermo Aviledo is one of the most respected figures of Venezuela's opposition. He believes in peaceful dialogue. If the authorities let him out of the country, he will go to Strasbourg with other opposition leaders to receive the Sakharov Prize. Professor Aviledo, in terms of human rights in this country, what's the situation?
Human rights violations are on the rise, not just with regard to risk to life or free speech, but also in terms of the right to health, which is another basic right. This report, written by the Human Rights Assembly at the Parliament, tells us everything. In this graph, we can see the increase in murders. We have a lot of different problems related to human rights violations in this country, and all of them are increasing.
Professor, what does the Sakharov Prize mean for the Venezuelan opposition?
It means a lot to us and for the Venezuelan people. The Sakharov Prize has existed since 1988. When you look at previous winners, both people and NGOs, you realize it's a list of human rights and social liberty fighters. And this already means a lot, not to mention the fact that the people of Latin America have only been rewarded on 5 occasions. And this is important. It shows how worried Europe is regarding the state of things in Venezuela. But I would also underline that this is the very first time in the history of this prize that a public institution has been awarded. NGOs, normal people, and also the press have won, but never a public body like a parliament. This is very important because it shows that within the Venezuelan state there's a battle between those who protect the constitution, human rights and freedom, and those who attack these key things. It shows that the Venezuelan people are fighting for their freedom.
In the last few days, the Venezuelan government has said there will be no dialogue if Washington does not lift the economic sanctions against Venezuela. I do not understand what the US sanctions have to do with the political dialogue between Venezuelans.
It has nothing to do with this. Like other dictatorships, our government wants to make out that there isn't any confrontation between those in power and the people, but a confrontation between Venezuela and other countries instead. This is because Venezuela is obliged to respect international law, for instance, human rights. It's the reason why there are sanctions against political officers in the Venezuelan government as a whole. But Chavistas want to show that these sanctions are against the Venezuelan people instead. Chavistas have had to take responsibility for not respecting human rights. The sanctions are against specific public servants and members of the government. What the government's trying to do is wrap itself in the national flag in order to mix things up. They want to confuse personal interests with the interests of the Venezuelan people. It's an old trick, often used by dictatorships.
Do you think a political amnesty for some Chavists would help kick-start a democratic transition and dialogue?
y una transición democrática.
Yo creo que hay que buscar todos los
We have to look at every opportunity politics, rights or diplomacy can offer. We must walk every possible path in order to find a solution. The most important thing is to try and mitigate the suffering of the Venezuelan people. Some people speak foolishly about the fact that a foreign invasion or even civil war might solve things. This would only make the situation worse. Using force doesn't solve anything, it only leaves deep wounds. The force which the government is using is the precise cause of the suffering we are currently experiencing. This is why we must explore the possibilities offered by politics and law. If we can get political transition through peaceful means, in the least traumatic way, this would be a major help and highly advantageous.
Professor Avelledo, thank you.
Sí, soy Alberto. Sí.
The government refuses to recognize the very existence of political prisoners in Venezuela. Those in jail for political or civil disobedience are accused of terrorism. Representing them in court can be extremely dangerous. Lawyers who defend political opponents can face huge problems in both their private and professional life. Despite that, the crisis in the country has reached such a level that more and more people appear to be losing their fear. They are prepared to support those who have been put behind bars. Gonzalo Imabo founded Foro Penal, a pool of lawyers and volunteers who represent and provide legal assistance to hundreds of political prisoners. We met him to find out what it's like for those who've been jailed. Exact numbers on how many people are currently in prison for their activism vary widely, but they include peaceful protesters, critics of the government and opposition politicians. Human Rights Watch says opposition groups in the country have identified more than 600 detainees. What constitutes a political prisoner for you? Does a definition exist?
The first category are those people who are criminalized for what they represent. They are neutralized as potential political leaders or actors of social mobilization. In this group, we find the most famous political prisoners, like Leopoldo Lopez, Antonio Ledesma, Daniel Ceballos, etc. From an individual point of view, these people represent a threat to the existing power structure, and this is the reason why the government tries to neutralize them. This is the first category. The second category are those people who, as individuals, are unknown but are part of something. For example, an institution. They may belong to a specific group which the government wants to get rid of, such as students, journalists or judges. I would like to mention the case of Maria Lourdes Afiuni. She is one of the most symbolic cases. She is under arrest not for what she is as an individual, but for who she belongs to. They are sending a message. If you fight the establishment, we will get you.
Según el cual, si tú decides contra el poder, puedes llegar a estar preso. La tercera categoría es lo que nosotros llamamos los presos de propaganda. Cada vez que el poder necesita
the third category are what we call propaganda prisoners. Every time the authorities wish to justify the official position, it attacks and criminalizes some people in order to attack a certain section of society. This is done so as to maintain and strengthen its own propaganda. For instance, when the government claims we are in an economic war, it will arrest traders or a specific category of trader. This is all done to show that it is the traders who are responsible for the economic crisis and not the government. Chavism deflects its responsibility onto those people.
Por ejemplo, con los agentes inmobiliarios, ha pasado con los gerentes y dueños de bancos y de casas de bolsa.
Real estate developers, bankers and currency traders have all been targeted, as have doctors and pharmacists. It has even happened to bakers when the government said there was no more bread because there was a war on bread. Consequently, they arrested a lot of bakers to justify their own narrative, claiming they were the villains. In this way, the government avoids taking responsibility for the economic crisis. These are the three categories of prisoner.
There's a question I have to ask you. All prisoners aspire to freedom. According to your NGO, was it reprehensible for Antonio Ledesma, the former mayor of Caracas, to flee Venezuela?
Listen, in general terms, if you are a political prisoner and you are in custody, and you evade justice without the use of violence against persons or property, this is not a felony in Venezuela. It is somehow accepted. Every time this happens, though, we are very worried about who didn't escape. If you think of political prisoners as hostages, you can imagine that if one hostage escapes, the one who will pay the consequences is not who escaped, it is who didn't escape. And this is what is happening to Leopoldo Lopez or Daniel Ceballos. They increase restrictive measures against them. They put electronic bracelets on them. They can receive less visits. So that's why we are worried when things like that happen. And it's also more complicated for us as defense lawyers to convince judges to ease measures against our clients who are in prison by granting them conditional release, for instance. Why? Because they could say, if I grant you conditional release, you could escape. That won't make me look good. The government wants to use prisoners as bargaining chips instead, so things get worse for us. But I have to say that if you are a prisoner, and above all a political prisoner, you have the right to try to escape. You have the right to recover your freedom.
Thank you. As a lawyer, Gonzalo Imibo suggests we talk to a young woman who spent almost 3 years in jail for tweeting against Chavism. We cannot take the risk of shooting on the streets, so we meet her at her home to find out how dangerous it is to speak out against those in power. Scarlene Duarte was just 22 when she was arrested. She spent nearly 3 years in prison. Her father died when she was in jail and the judge did not let her out to attend his funeral. What happened the day you were freed?
It felt like I was born again. Freedom is priceless. You don't know what you have until it's gone. What I regret most is not being able to say farewell to my father. He fought for me, and he died while I was in prison. It was very difficult. I couldn't be with him.
So your father died and they did not let you go to the funeral?
Yes, I was in prison and my daddy died. I couldn't see him. I wasn't able to say goodbye.
Could you tell us what happened to you?
In 2014, I tweeted about political personalities, and the government didn't appreciate. Some time later, about 6 months later, around 10 officers from the SEBIN, the Venezuelan Secret Service, came to search my home. They had a warrant and they searched my home. They didn't tell me why. I didn't know why because those tweets were old. They searched computers, laptops, etc. and told me that I had to go with them because they wanted to interrogate me. I left with them at 3:30 in the afternoon. They started to interrogate me, but I didn't know why, because they hadn't told me anything. After a while, I understood the reason why I was there. They started to ask questions, but I denied all the accusations. Night fell, and they told me my parents were waiting for me outside. They asked me tons of questions. I don't remember what exactly. I denied everything. So they let me go, but they told me that they would have to carry on with the investigation. I went home. 1 month later, they rang me at home and told me to go to the police station to pick up some of the equipment that they had seized at my home. So I thought, that's okay, they'll just give me my stuff back. And I went. They started to ask me more questions about the tweets. So I asked them why I was there, whether I was there to get my equipment back, what was happening. I could see that they didn't have any intention of returning my equipment, and I understood it was a trap and they wanted to arrest me.
But what were you accused of?
I was accused of digital espionage, sabotage, as well as incitement to hatred and insult to public officials. So those were the felonies I was accused of.
What sentence did they hand down after all that?
My trial was postponed 27 times. I never had a preliminary hearing.
But were you convicted?
No. Up until today, I keep going to court and they keep scheduling hearings that I have to attend as a free person.
Could you show us some pictures of the campaign organized by your friends while you were in prison?
Of course. These are some of the pictures of the campaign organized while I was in jail. These pictures helped make my case known to the world.
As an ordinary citizen, what do you think of the current state of dialogue between the opposition and the government?
In my opinion, this dialogue is useless because the government wants to impose its position. I don't think they'll reach an agreement. The government wants to impose its views. Things won't change. It makes no sense to waste words on something that won't give any results.
Stalin Duarte, thank you. Plagued by poverty, food shortages and hyperinflation, Venezuela is a deeply polarized country between a minority government and an overwhelming majority of people demanding change. But it is also a very rich country, sitting on some of the world's largest oil reserves, a hotbed for competing interests, a time bomb, which not only threatens its people, but the entire region.